The rain hadn't stopped since morning. The house still smelled faintly of lilies from the funeral. Clara sat on the floor beside a half-open box, her mother's handwriting looping across faded envelopes. One, sealed in red wax, stood out. For Clara, her fingers trembled. Inside wasn't a letter, but an official document. Marriage certificate. Evelyn Hart and Daniel Hart. Clara froze. Her mother's name. A man she'd never heard of. How long had my mother been married to a stranger? She whispered. And what else had she hidden from us? The sound of thunder swallowed the silence. In that moment, she realized she might not have truly known the woman she buried yesterday. Outside, wind rattled the window pane. A framed photograph on the mantel slipped, crashing to the floor. Behind it, something metallic glimmered in the shadows. Clara leaned closer, heart pounding. It wasn't a coin. It was a key engraved with the word Ashbury. Clara sat awake past midnight, the key still on her desk. She'd searched every box, every folder, hoping the name Ashbury might appear again. It didn't. Her laptop glowed pale blue against the darkness as she typed, Ashbury, Daniel Hart. Dozens of results appeared. None she recognized. Her mother's face lingered in her mind, smiling in old photos, hiding something behind those eyes. She whispered, "Why didn't you tell us, Mom?" The sound of the storm had faded, replaced by the hum of the refrigerator and her own heartbeat. The cursor blinked over a line that caught her breath. Ashbury Estate Auction. Hart Collection, 2004. Her mother's handwriting had dated the sealed envelope that same year. It couldn't be coincidence. Somewhere in that seaside town, the answers waited, and maybe the truth she wasn't ready to find. Morning broke in pale gray. Oliver stood by the kitchen counter, scrolling through his phone, refusing to meet Clara's eyes. "It's just some mistake," he muttered. "Mom wasn't married to anyone else." Clara slid the certificate across the table toward him. "Her signature's there, Oliver." He frowned, shaking his head. "Then it's forged." But Clara noticed how his hand lingered over their mother's name. "If it's not," she said quietly. "Then what else did she lie about?" The question hung heavy in the air. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the silence between them grew louder. Oliver finally looked up. "If you go digging into this, don't expect me to follow." She nodded slowly. "I'm not asking you to." By afternoon, Clara drove to Margaret Cole's house. Her mother's best friend had been at the funeral, but avoided her since. The old gate creaked as she entered the garden. Margaret appeared on the porch, her gray hair pinned neatly, her eyes watchful. "You shouldn't be here, Clara," she said softly. "I just need to know if you ever heard of a man named Daniel Hart." Margaret's lips tightened. Some doors shouldn't be opened. Clara stepped closer, voice trembling. "Then why did my mother hide a marriage certificate?" Margaret's eyes flickered with pain. "Because some truths destroy more than they heal." Clara stared at her, realizing Margaret knew more than she would ever admit. That evening, Clara returned home. She placed the key on her mother's old jewelry box, staring at its reflection in the polished lid. For the first time, she noticed a faint inscription etched beneath the box. NDH 2004. Her pulse quickened. It matched the year on the auction listing. She lifted the lid. The velvet inside was worn, but tucked beneath the lining lay a folded map, marked Ashbury Bay. The handwriting was unmistakably Evelyn's. Clara sank into the chair, eyes filling with tears and determination. "Whatever you were hiding, Mom," she whispered, "I'm going to find it." Outside, the night sea wind howled against the window. It sounded almost like a voice answering back. The coastal road to Ashbury curved along cliffs that seemed to vanish into fog. Clara's old car rattled with every gust of wind. She kept the map unfolded on the passenger seat, Evelyn's handwriting guiding her like a ghost's whisper. The ocean below was a gray blur, restless and cold. As she crossed the town's worn wooden sign, "Welcome to Ashbury Bay," she felt the air shift, heavy with sea salt and memory. Small cottages lined the narrow streets, their shutters faded by storms. Somewhere here, Daniel Hart had lived. She parked by a seaside antique shop with a cracked sign that read Hart and Company, Antiques. Her heart pounded. The door creaked as she stepped inside, the scent of old wood and forgotten time thick in the air. The bell above the shop door jingled softly. Dust floated in the still air. Rows of antique clocks, mirrors, and jewelry glimmered in dim light. Behind the counter stood a man with silver hair and a quiet presence. "Can I help you?" he asked. Clara hesitated. "Are you Daniel Hart?" His expression froze, then softened. But I'm afraid you have me at a disadvantage." She studied him. He looked nothing like a stranger. His voice carried the weight of someone who had once known her mother's secrets. "I'm Clara Reeves," she said. "Evelyn Reeves was my mother." For a heartbeat, silence. His face went pale. "You shouldn't have come here," he whispered. Clara's voice trembled. "You were married to my mother." Daniel looked away, hands tightening on the counter's edge. "You shouldn't believe everything you find in papers." "It's her signature," she insisted. "And your name," he sighed, eyes glassy. That was another lifetime. Clara leaned closer. Then why did she hide it? Daniel's gaze drifted toward a framed photo behind him. Evelyn, younger, radiant, standing beside the sea. "Because some loves aren't meant to survive daylight," he said softly. Clara's pulse quickened. "Then tell me what she was hiding." Daniel hesitated, then turned the photo face down. "Not here. Not yet. Not yet." Clara stepped outside, shaken. The ocean wind hit her face, sharp and cold. Across the street, a cafe sign swung in the breeze. Inside, she ordered coffee and opened her notebook, sketching connections. Her mother's handwriting. Daniel's reaction. The key marked Ashbury. An elderly waitress stopped by her table. "You visiting?" she asked kindly. "Sort of," Clara replied. "Looking for someone named Hart." The woman smiled faintly. Everyone here knew Daniel and Evelyn Hart, beautiful couple. Kept to themselves. Clara's pen froze. "You knew her?" The woman nodded. "She loved this town, until one day she just stopped coming." As evening fell, Clara returned to her car. The town had grown quieter, the tide creeping higher. She looked once more at the antique shop. The lights were off now, curtains drawn. On impulse, she stepped closer and peered through the window. Behind the counter where Daniel had stood, a single object rested beneath a spotlight. A small silver jewelry box, engraved with the initials ER and DH. Her breath caught. It was identical to her mother's. Before she could think, a reflection appeared in the glass. Daniel, standing behind her in the dark street. "You shouldn't have come back tonight," he said. The lawyer's office smelled faintly of old books and coffee. Clara sat beside Oliver, both silent as the sound of rain tapped against the window. Across the mahogany desk, Margaret Cole adjusted her glasses. "Your mother's will is unconventional," she began. Clara straightened. "Unconventional how?" Margaret glanced at Daniel, who sat quietly in the corner, hands folded, eyes downcast. "Half of Evelyn Reeves' estate is to be transferred to Mr. Daniel Hart." The words hit like a blow. Oliver rose abruptly. "That's impossible. He's a stranger." Daniel didn't look up. Clara whispered. "No, he's not." For the first time, Daniel met her eyes, filled with guilt, love, and something deeper, truth. Oliver's voice rose until it cracked. He manipulated her. He shouted, He's after the money. Daniel remained calm, fingers pressed together. You think I wanted this, he said softly. She left it because she loved you both. Clara turned sharply. Then, why did she keep you secret? Daniel's face hardened. Because truth destroys families, Clara. She couldn't risk losing you. Margaret intervened gently. Please, everyone. But the damage was done. Oliver stormed out, the door slamming behind him. The silence that followed was heavier than anger. Clara finally whispered, If my mother trusted you with half her life, you'll tell me why. Margaret closed the office blinds, her tone quieter now. There's more you should know, she said. She slid an envelope toward Clara. Inside was a notarized document, Evelyn's handwriting once again. It wasn't just a will, it was a trust. This was created 21 years ago, Margaret explained. Your mother named Daniel Hart as a co-trustee. Clara's stomach turned. The date matched the year her father left. She met Daniel's gaze. You've been part of our lives this whole time, she said. Daniel nodded faintly. Just not in the way you think. Clara's eyes burned. Then tell me what she was protecting. Daniel looked away. You. Clara followed Daniel outside after the meeting. The sky was bruised with twilight. He paused by the curb, raincoat collar turned up. She never meant to hurt you, he said. Then why did she lie? Clara asked. Daniel sighed, eyes fixed on the wet pavement. Because she was never free to love me. Your father, he never signed the divorce papers. Clara blinked. You're saying she was still married? Daniel nodded slowly. To both of us, in a way. The world tilted around her. The word bigamy formed silently in her mind. Her mother's greatest secret revealed in the soft drizzle of the dying day. Back in her car, Clara gripped the steering wheel, her mother's secret replaying in her mind. Evelyn had lived two lives, one as the devoted mother in their family home, another as Evelyn Hart, hidden wife of a man who still grieved her in silence. She opened her phone and scrolled through old messages from her mother. Gentle reminders, small affections, coded phrases she never questioned. Take care of your heart, one read. Now, it felt like a clue. The rain began again, streaking the windshield. Clara whispered, You built your whole life on lies, Mom. But why? She didn't yet know that the answer waited inside the house she'd just inherited, in Ashbury. The next morning, Clara sat in Margaret's living room, surrounded by boxes Margaret had kept for legal reasons. Margaret's hands shook slightly as she opened one. Inside lay Evelyn's leather-bound journals, tied with a faded ribbon. She made me promise to keep them safe until the time came, Margaret said softly. Clara untied the ribbon and opened the first one. The handwriting leapt from the page, familiar, tender, alive. For the weekends, I am someone else. For those 2 days, I belong to no one but him. Clara's throat tightened. Every word felt like a secret being spoken aloud. Margaret's eyes glistened. She loved you more than her own freedom, Clara. And for the first time, Clara began to believe it. The journal entries unfolded like a confession. Daniel waits at the Cove every Saturday. We speak of a house by the sea, a place no one else knows exists. Clara traced the ink with her fingertip. Her mother's handwriting trembled in later pages, as if written in haste or fear. If anyone ever finds this, tell Clara I was never ashamed of love. Clara closed the book, her heart pounding. Margaret whispered, She wasn't running from you. She was protecting you. Outside, the wind brushed the curtains gently, like Evelyn's presence passing through. Clara turned the page again, finding a drawing. A small house on a cliff labeled Ashbury Bay. That night, Clara dreamed of her mother. The dream didn't feel like memory. It felt like time folding in on itself. She saw Evelyn, young again, standing on a windy cliff, laughing as Daniel wrapped his coat around her shoulders. If love built our marriage, Evelyn's voice whispered in the wind, what was it hiding? The dream blurred. Evelyn's face turned older, her eyes full of worry. They can never know, she said, then vanished into light. Clara woke gasping, the sound of waves echoing faintly in her mind, though she was miles from the sea. For the first time, she felt not just her mother's secret, but her loneliness. Clara woke before dawn and began packing a small bag. She had read enough. Now she needed to see it for herself. She called Margaret. The journals mention a house by the cliffs. Do you know where it is? Margaret hesitated, voice trembling. Ice, but if you go there, you'll find more than answers. Clara replied softly. That's what I'm afraid of. She hung up, gripping the key that had started it all. Outside, the first light broke across the sky. She slipped the journals into her bag, her mother's voice still echoing in her head. Somewhere in Ashbury Bay, the past was waiting to be found. By noon, Clara stood before a weathered iron gate. The sign read private property. Beyond it, through fog and salt spray, stood the Ashbury house, small, gray, and half swallowed by ivy. Her pulse quickened. She turned the key in the gate's lock. It clicked open easily, as if it had been waiting for her. Inside, the house smelled of sea and cedar. Everything was untouched. A table set for two. A framed photograph of her mother and Daniel by the fireplace. Dust shimmered in the light through broken blinds. Clara's hand trembled as she whispered, "You really lived here." And in that whisper, the truth no longer belonged to the past. It belonged to her. The house felt frozen in time. Clara wandered through rooms filled with quiet ghosts, her mother's perfume still faint on the air. On the dresser lay a framed photo. Evelyn and Daniel at a seaside fair, laughing. Beneath it, Clara found another envelope marked, "In case Clara ever comes." Her hands trembled as she unfolded the letter. My love was never betrayal. Her mother had written, "It was my only truth." Evelyn described how Daniel had waited for her every weekend, how the law had trapped her in a life she no longer belonged to. "I could not free myself without losing you." Clara pressed the paper to her chest, tears blurring the ink. Her mother's double life wasn't deceit, it was survival. A knock at the door startled her. Daniel stood there, windblown and quiet. "I thought I might find you here," he said. Clara stepped aside, unable to speak. He looked around the room, his gaze falling on the photo. "She loved this place," he murmured. Clara's voice cracked. "You kept this from us." Daniel nodded. "Because she asked me to. She wanted to leave you with peace, not questions." Clara shook her head. "Peace built on lies isn't peace." He looked at her then. Truly looked. "No, but it kept you safe." The silence between them filled the house like an echo of old love and unfinished promises. They sat opposite each other at the small kitchen table. The air hummed with the sound of waves beyond the window. "She told me once," Daniel began, "that love doesn't always ask permission. It just happens, and then you live with the consequences." He smiled faintly. "We met after your father left. I didn't know he hadn't divorced her. By the time I found out, she was already mine." Clara frowned. "And you stayed married, knowing it was illegal?" Daniel's eyes softened. "Because love made her feel free for the first time. And I couldn't take that from her." Clara stared down at her hands. "You risked everything for her." Daniel nodded. "So did she." Clara explored the rest of the house while Daniel lingered by the window. In a small bedroom, she found a wardrobe filled with her mother's clothes, the same style she remembered from childhood, yet somehow different. Hidden behind them hung a white dress, simple and elegant, yellowed by time. A photograph slipped from its pocket. Evelyn wearing that dress, Daniel at her side, both smiling in sunlight. Clara turned it over. The back read, H and DH, our true beginning. She felt the weight of every lie, every choice her mother made. And still, beneath the ache, a strange peace stirred, the kind that comes from finally understanding. As dusk fell, Clara joined Daniel outside by the cliffs. The sea roared below them, the sky turning the color of bruised lavender. "She wanted to tell you," Daniel said quietly, "but she thought it would make you hate her." Clara wiped her eyes. "I could never hate her." Daniel smiled sadly. Then she got her wish. They stood in silence, watching the tide rise. The waves crashed against the rocks as if trying to erase the years between them. "She left me this house," Clara said. Daniel nodded. "She left you her truth." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain and salt, and somewhere in that sound, Evelyn's laughter seemed to return home. The next morning, Clara woke to the sound of gulls and the smell of salt. The house seemed brighter, almost alive again. She noticed something she hadn't before: a small locked drawer inside the writing desk. The key marked Ashbury fit perfectly. Inside lay a single sealed envelope labeled Inheritance. Her pulse raced. She tore it open. Inside wasn't money, but a deed, the title to the Ashbury house signed in her name. A note rested beneath it. "This is yours now, Clara. Build what I couldn't finish." She sank into the chair, overwhelmed. Evelyn hadn't left her wealth. She'd left her a story, a home, and a second chance to heal what love had broken. Later that day, Margaret arrived unannounced, her expression weary but resolute. "She left this for you," she said, handing Clara a small cassette tape. The label read, "For my daughter." Clara's heart pounded. She knew this would happen. Margaret nodded. "She always knew you'd come." Clara hesitated, then placed the tape in an old recorder from the shelf. The room filled with the soft crackle of tape. Then Evelyn's voice, gentle, trembling. "If you're hearing this, it means the truth found its way home." Clara covered her mouth as tears fell freely. "I never meant to hide love. I meant to protect you from the kind of heartbreak that nearly destroyed me." Evelyn's voice continued. "Daniel was my peace, but you were my purpose. I lived two lives to keep both. The world called it deceit, but to me, it was balance." Clara's breath hitched as the recording crackled again. "Ashbury was never about hiding. It was about remembering who I really was. And now it belongs to you." The tape clicked to an end. Clara looked at Margaret, who whispered, "She wanted you to forgive her." Clara wiped her eyes. "She doesn't need forgiveness," she said softly. "She needs to be understood." Outside, waves broke against the cliffs, echoing her mother's final words. As night fell, Clara stood outside the house, watching the tide roll in. Daniel joined her quietly. "She wanted you to have it," he said. "This house, this truth." Clara nodded. "I think she wanted us both to let her go." Daniel smiled faintly. "She never really left." The wind carried the faint scent of lavender, Evelyn's perfume. Clara felt something lift inside her, a weight dissolving into peace. "What will you do now?" Daniel asked. Clara looked toward the ocean. "I'll restore this place. Maybe tell her story." Daniel's eyes softened. "Then she'll live again." And for the first time, they both smiled. Later, inside, Clara placed the journals, the letter, and the key on the mantel beneath her mother's photograph. "You were never just hiding, were you?" she whispered. "You were protecting love in all its forms." She lit a candle beside the frame, the flame flickering like a heartbeat. Outside, rain began softly again, tapping against the windows. Not sorrowful this time, but rhythmic. Alive. She sat in the silence and felt Evelyn's presence, not as a ghost, but as a guide. The inheritance wasn't the house, or even the truth. It was the courage to live without shame, just as her mother had once dared to do. The next morning, the storm had passed. Sunlight spread across the sea like a soft confession. Clara brewed coffee and opened one of Evelyn's last journals, the one she hadn't dared to read. Inside, between the last pages, was a cassette photo. Evelyn and Daniel, older now, standing in front of the Ashbury house, smiling with peace. Beneath it, Evelyn had written, "One day you'll stand where I stood and you'll understand." Clara smiled faintly through tears. She finally did. Her mother's secret marriage wasn't betrayal. It was her way of holding two worlds together, even when it tore her apart. Clara whispered, "You were stronger than I ever knew." Clara stepped outside, barefoot onto the damp grass. The sea breeze touched her face, cold and kind. She could almost hear Evelyn's laughter echoing in the wind. For the first time, she didn't feel haunted. She felt guided. Looking out at the horizon, she realized the house wasn't just her inheritance. It was her mother's unfinished story, waiting for its ending. She whispered into the wind, "He'll tell it, Mom. All of it." The waves broke softly below, as if in approval. The past had stopped hiding. The truth had finally breathed. Weeks later, Clara sat at her desk, typing the first words of her mother's story. The screen glowed with the title, "The Secret Marriage." Outside, waves whispered against the cliffs. Margaret had sent her the final document Evelyn left behind. A letter to the town council donating part of the property as a writing retreat for women seeking second beginnings. Clara smiled through tears. Her mother hadn't just left her the truth. She left a legacy of courage. Each keystroke felt like breathing life back into her memory. Evelyn's voice seemed to linger above her shoulder. "Tell it with love." Months passed. The house became alive again. Laughter, visitors, and writers filling its quiet rooms. Daniel often came by, bringing flowers from the market, sharing stories about Evelyn that Clara had never known. They sat by the fireplace one evening, watching the sunset fade. "Ashed, be proud of you," Daniel said. Clara smiled. "I think she's here. Somehow?" He nodded. "She always will be." They clinked their mugs gently, the fire crackling between them. Love, grief, and memory no longer felt separate. They had become one quiet truth, carried on the sound of the sea. At dusk, Clara walked to the edge of the cliff where her mother once stood. The sea roared below, endless and alive. She held Evelyn's silver key in her palm one last time, kissed it gently, and threw it into the waves. "You can rest now," she whispered. The wind carried her words away, scattering them into the horizon. For the first time, Clara felt completely still. No questions, no anger, only love. Behind her, the house glowed softly against the darkening sky. The story had come full circle. Evelyn Reeves had lived two lives for love. And through her daughter, that love would live forever.